Hi. Thanks for having me here. I'm Keri. I'm a senior SRE at Noble 9, and today I want to talk about the reality of reliability, which is also a great tongue twister, by the way, if you try to say it too many times. So this is how I used to feel when I was on call. This is what my reality felt like, and if you can tell from this very real picture of me, it sucked. I was on a team of 3. We owned a lot of internal tools, one of which was a tool that got passed from team to team all the time. Nobody wanted to own it. It was really easy to break, and just everybody avoided it. And that was our LDAP, which you might know is a directory service. So we supported this very outdated, not very stable version of it. The architecture was a mess. Like I said, it was handed from team to team. So there was always problems with it, and we never felt like we had time to fix it because everybody was always relying on it to do their jobs. So it broke a lot, and at the time, we didn't have a good on-call rotation, or we didn't have a on-call rotation at all. It was just all 3 of us on call all the time. So it was a recipe for burnout. I can't tell you how many times I stayed up till 3 in the morning trying to fix this before people were going to be logging in online the next day. And half the time, it was just some configuration change that somebody accidentally pushed that they shouldn't have even really had access to that in the first place. But anyway, I digress. Unfortunately, on-call horror stories like this are very common. And I'm sure this is relatable to most of you in this room in some way or form. And I'm sure that most of you have at least one story that you could share. And I want to actually spend some time at the end, if anyone's willing to share their stories, to pass the mic around so that we can hear from all of you as well. They say misery loves company, but I do think that it's just that we want to remember that we're not alone in those moments. And a lot of us have gone through the same thing, so it's just feels really good to talk to somebody who understands that stress and pain, or just hear somebody else's story that's gone through something similar. But it's not just about the camaraderie. I think there's so much that we can learn from each other this way, too. I was talking to a few folks about this recently, but I do think that every organization has their nuances. So you might not always find an exact match of a situation that's going to work out for your org. But the more information that we can take in from other people, the better we're going to be able to make more informed decisions. I think it's important to remember that we are human and our customers are human. So we have to also remember to take care of ourselves as much as we have to take care of our customers. Oh, sneak peek, sorry. So I'm hoping that by sharing some of our horror stories later, we can, and the tools that we've used to learn to use from them, we can help spread some of the data around and help each other make better decisions and maybe commiserate a little bit. So I wanted to start with 2 tools that really helped me better manage the services that I support and how they've helped me prevent returning to my days as a soulless skeleton. And that's the SLOs and service level objectives, and the ICS, or the incident management or incident command system. So let's start with SLOs. I know there was a talk about this yesterday. I'm just going to go over it really briefly again. So this is what I like to call the reliability stack. It's SLIs, SLOs, and error budgets. So service level indicators, service level objectives, and error budgets. The first piece of this is an SLI, and that's just the metric that tells you how your service is operating, usually in a ratio of good to bad. And this data is usually what you get from tools that you already have in place to monitor your services. There's a lot of debate on the best place to start here. I think it really depends on what monitors you already have in place and the type of services you run, which I feel like since I said the word, I need to show this meme. Say the line, senior dev, it depends. Anyway, back to it. A lot of people talk about the 4 golden signals here. Those are fine. Again, it just really depends on your situation. If you are going to talk about the 4 golden signals, I like to add a sneaky 5th one in there called correctness. My suggestion here is that if you do use the golden signals, just don't forget about the end goal, which is to measure your services in a way that will bring it back to something meaningful to your customers. Because I think that is easy to get lost when you start with the golden signals. So with your SLI, you'll be able to build an SLO. and that's really just one or more targets or thresholds that you want your SLI to meet. We're just basically giving ourselves a goal here. So I think the best SLOs are goals that help you determine the realistic minimum customer satisfaction of your customers. So you can think of this in the sense of like, what is the worst experience my customer is willing to go through without leaving me? And again, I think it depends on your product and how you deploy. For example, there's a lot of fintech folks here, and I know that there's generally like regular maintenance windows for y'all, for your deployments to limit the potential bad experiences due to outages. When you have that many hoops to jump through, I think that you have to kind of limit that in that way. So you can limit the time that you're most vulnerable, and SLOs can also help you do that as well. So that brings us to error budget. This is just an easier way to understand our performance over a period of time. Without error budget, we don't really get any new information from our SLOs, right? It's basically just saying like our SLO is doing fine right now, and right now, and right now, and so on. So our original monitoring tools already tell us all of that information, but the error budget quantifies that over a time window. So again, for a bank, for example, they might set their time window to something that matches their maintenance window. That way they can measure how their deployments are actually impacting potential vulnerability at that time. So let's zoom out and talk about this in broader terms. Let's say we want to be 99% reliable over the next 30 days. That means we can be 1% unreliable. And 1% of 30 days is 7 hours, 18 minutes, and 17 seconds. So that's the amount of time that our service can be having a bad time. And it's those type of realistic buffers that give us time to improve our services and prioritize our work. So, if your service is going down 10 hours every month, you know that you should probably focus on your reliability. If your error budget is only 1% like this, because you're going to be exceeding your error budget at that time. But if it's only going down 10 seconds every month, like you can do one of two things. You can either give yourself permission to work on other projects and features, or you can do chaos practices, like what happens when everything takes a poop on the bed. I don't know if I can swear. But anyway, the gist is like, what's the worst case scenario, and how do you recover from that? So that's SLOs. It has a lot of great benefits. It fights alert fatigue. I got another slide here. There you go. It fights alert fatigue. It helps you communicate across the whole company. You can help prioritize your work, and ultimately, it just helps promote a better and healthier development culture. I know my work feels the most meaningful when I can connect it back to the customers that are actually using it. And I've heard that from a lot of other friends in the industry as well. So I think that is something that gets lost really often in the process, and I like being able to use something like SLOs to connect that back. And now I don't have to get woken up at 3 in the morning unless that incident is actually impacting a customer. So here's an actual very recent example. I was on call last weekend, and I got an alert that our error budget was burning at a really fast rate over the weekend. So I hopped online, checked it out, and I saw this. And it's not always done this way. In this particular case, we had two objectives. One was our perfect situation or our ideal situation, and one was the absolute minimum, the lowest point of that threshold. And when I went online and I saw this on a Sunday, I realized we're really not in the worst case scenario. I'm getting alerted because we're not at what we would like to be, but it could wait till Monday. So I ended up not having to waste my Sunday on this, waited till Monday, and Monday morning the dev team or another team basically said, we know about this error and we have a hotfix going out today for it. So all in all, it saved my weekend. And it's been doing that many times since. So SLOs are a great tool, but what happens when things do does hit the fan? I want to introduce you then to the incident command system. You might already be familiar to it. So let me just start with a little backstory on the incident command system. So this was formalized by firefighters back in 1968, and they were struggling with putting out forest fires fast enough, or at the rate that they believe they should be able to. And that rate always plummeted the more complicated the situation got. So if there was multiple counties involved, or the fire spread to multiple states, or if there was an agency involved, like it crossed into national park territory. So they hired some really smart people that helped them figure out how they could streamline their response, and they basically gave them a report card that said they had these 4 major areas to improve. So they had lack of accountability, poor communication, no established hierarchy, so people were making, or I'm sorry, no one knew who was in charge, and then there was just too much freelancing where people were making their own decisions because they didn't know who was in charge. So basically it was just chaos. And so the system that they developed from this data in its simplest form goes something kind of like this. So a first responder will come on the scene, and they assess the situation, and maybe they determine that there's these 3 things that they need to do in order to get this under control. So those are represented by the 3 black circles there. Now they could probably do all 3 things by themselves, but instead they wanted to streamline this, so they start delegating. So they hand off each duty to a new person. So that could be something like an offensive lead, a defensive lead, and a comms person. So offensive will be trying to actively fight the forest fire. Defensive is going to talk about or plan kind of for the future of like how do we prevent this from happening in the future. And then the comms lead is going to make sure everybody gets the word out. They can limit the people that come into the situation and the bystanders as well. So from there, they might even start delegating down from there and handing that off to the task people. So you have the strategy person at the top, operations people in the middle, and then everybody doing the individual tasks under there. And you can delegate down as many times as you need. But the beauty of this is that there's always an established hierarchy, and you have one duty that you report up to a single person. So let's just replace some of these terms here to make it a little bit more relatable to our industry. So we still have an incident commander, but now instead we have an operations lead, and that's the person who's actually making the changes in production. And we have a comms lead, somebody who's reaching out to the customers or maybe talking to other teams to make sure everybody understands what's going on. And a planning lead, they might be sending in bug tickets to get fixed in the future, or recording the state of the incident for later. And yeah. And the planning lead is the person who kind of has the whole scope of the state of the incident so that you can use that in retrospectives after the case. But anyway, you can see here, it's the same solution. All of these duties are now led by someone who has a singular focus and reporting structure that all funnels back up to this incident commander. And depending on how large your incident is, you might have, like I said, like maybe 6 levels of delegation down underneath this. But the best part about this is because you only have one focus, it's easy to hand off your duty because you don't have to hand off 10 things to one person and expect them to understand everything that they need to do within 2 minutes of talking to them. So it's a lot easier not to lose track of what you need to do on long-running incidents. And it provides a lot of accountability because you always have one person above you that you're going to be reporting the status of your job to. So this system can be pretty tough to master, especially if your company's fully remote. Basically, you're just asking for a lot of over-communication here, and it's easy to step back and just make assumptions that somebody else is dealing with this. But when you do that, you end up freelancing, which was one of the root problems that the firefighters had in the first place. So it is tough, but when you really stick to this system, it works really well. I've been an incident commander working with folks all over the world during an incident, and this system made it feel like we were in a room together. So it just made the whole thing go so much cleaner and quicker, and we've been able to solve things in, I would say, like 50% of the time that it would have normally taken without this system. So it's very useful. And I was just mentioning to somebody last night, actually, one thing that we started doing as part of our retrospective is we start building an SLO now to help us catch whatever issue happened in our incident for future use cases as well. So that way we're always learning from our mistakes and we're taking steps to make sure that we don't repeat them. So those are my two favorites, SLOs and ICS. Again, service level objectives and incident command system. It's a lot of acronyms. You might notice there was a pattern in these tools. They're all about communication. Communication across the whole company. SLOs help communicate the state of your services in your customer's point of view, and the ICS helps when you're already in the thick of it, how to communicate the plan to mitigate it, and make sure no matter how complicated the issue is or how many lines it crosses that you'll be able to get the right people to the right jobs. So, and the point is, in both systems, at any point in time, anyone in the company should be able to figure out the state of the product. So I've been using these tools for the past 2 years now, and I am proud to say I am no longer this soulless skeleton. I'm now this one. So that's all I've got. Thank you all for listening. I would really love to hear from you now. So if it's possible, I wanted to pass this mic around, and if anyone wanted to share one of their on-call horror stories, or if you had a question, don't be afraid to speak up. I'll also be hanging out around too if anyone would rather talk one-on-one later. You go for it. You just hand it around. Do I have to call? I don't want to call on people. There's one over there. Oh, sorry. I saw you. I'll get you after.
Yeah, I've got two, and it's also related to developers in production. The first was actually, I was co-located to as my office mate at a previous company. He thought he was in a development environment and dropped a Publix distribution center's inventory table. So you shouldn't be in production. So that's one. Yeah. The other one's also related, where I single-handedly shut down all tax calculation at a distribution center in Argentina for a month, and no one knew. Both of those had some impact, as you might imagine. So.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I feel like you haven't really worked in dev until you've broken production at least once.
So I have a horror story and then kind of a question about that model that you laid out. So the horror story is my first job out of college. I worked for a supply chain management company. And anytime any alert got fired, whether it was just a single message erroring or a server down, everybody got paged. So we all had these little Motorola flip phones, and all it could do was make this horribly high-pitched ringing noise. But it would all go out simultaneously to all the engineers, regardless of who was on call. So my first experience of shell scripting was to actually write a paging rotator in Bash shell that would just look at a token file to see like who's on call, and if that person hadn't responded within like 5 minutes, then move to the next person. But I was like, my first month on call, I was like, no, this is not, because I was getting woken up 3-4 times a night, no problem. My question was, so with your little triangular hierarchy, how does the defensive lead communicate with the comms lead, right? Because like the comms lead is responsible for disseminating information to other people. It seems very inefficient to have to like go up to the incident commander and then back down. But like you would want the comms lead to have real-time information coming in from defensive and offensive. So could you comment on like how that communication structure is supposed to work?
Yeah, absolutely. First, your on-call horror story is awesome, and you sound like you work at PagerDuty. So for the hierarchy, I think the beauty of this system is that everything should be very public. I think it's very easy when you're in the middle of a situation like that, like an incident, to be like DMing somebody just to try to get one thing done, and then there's 5 other people trying to do the same thing that you aren't aware of. So the one thing that we do that we really stress when we're doing the incident command system is that we have a channel that we use. So we have like an operations channel, and every person who is a lead of some sort that's not just doing like a singular task, but even the task people too, every communication gets put in that channel. So anybody can go through and look at it. And then there's also the planning lead person. So I kind of briefly mentioned this, but there's something we call the incident state doc, ISD. And that's literally the state of the incident at any point in time. So that planning lead is the one who's documenting everything that's going on. So they're also communicating with the defensive and the offensive people. They're keeping the incident commander up to date. They're talking to other teams that might need to be involved, like support and reaching out to customers or updating your status page. So yeah, I think the roundabout way to answer your question is keep all of your chat public. And make sure that you have some sort of state doc that everybody is looking at for what's going on in the incident and gets all the highlights. Like we have a template that we use that we have exit criteria, we have a summary of what's going on in the incident, the state of the incident. So like, are we monitoring it? Are we investigating? Has it been resolved? Action items that we can do after the fact that we think of as we're going along. So generally, like I mentioned before, that's like building an SLO for this incident. And we even have like a section at the bottom where you can put like screenshots or copy paste from Slack for important messages that you want to make sure people don't miss. Hopefully that answered your question.
I had a question. You said you were incident commander for incidents for all types of companies around the world. How have you seen leaders hurt the process of incident response and management?
Sorry, you said leadership?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I think in my experience, I haven't had too many micromanagey, like executive leadership folks during the incidents, but there are people that want to, know what's going on. So we use this incident command system culture throughout the whole company and try to train our execs also to use the ISD. So they can go into there and, like first thing they see who's working on the incident and what's going on and the state of it. So we've also included them on all of our retros too, so that they can better understand kind of what happened and what we did to fix it. And so far, every place I've worked at that's used this system has been super supportive. So it works great with leadership.
Yeah, I've got a horror story that's, I don't know how this happened, but we were doing a cloud migration. Had an on-prem component, and there was a miscommunication. The person who was supposed to be there to confirm the on-premises part was working never showed up, and the principal engineer was basically the only person left. Unfortunately, his mother had just passed away 2 days before, and the CTO called me and said, yeah, you need to call him and tell him to go on and verify. That was a terrible one. So long story short, definitely have those plans up ahead. But I was curious, as far as in the incident commander scenario with what he was just asking, is the incident commander in charge of the CTO in that sense, right? So maybe the senior DevOps or senior SRE can tell the CTO, hey, you're not being very helpful. I mean, you can do that politely, right? But in that model, you got to fix the issue, right?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it takes a little bit of some sort of humbleness from your CTO in that case. But I think it goes back to whether they trust their team. They hired you to do your job, so they should trust you to do your job. And with a training system like this, where we generally go through like a hour session where we talk about the incident command system and all the situations that you can be in, we put our developers first in that, you are the one that gets to make this decision. You can take in advice from the CTO, but it's your call at the end of the day. And if it breaks, that's fine. Everything breaks. You can always fix it. So yeah, in that case, yeah, they are in command of the CTO. Oh, I just want to say one more thing. If the CTO doesn't agree with you, you hand off to them and make them the incident commander.
I have a quick horror story. I used to work for a startup that did alerting systems for seniors. So if they had medical problems, they could push a button and they would alert the front desk and get the paramedics there. Well, a developer had logged into one of the servers and they RM-RF'd the entire file system. And the backup that was supposed to be working did not work. So I got a call the day before Christmas that the senior living community had about 1,000 people and it could not call for help. So I actually flew out Christmas morning and went out to site and basically, just said there was a glitch with the server and I basically had to like reinstall everything and set everything up again and go through an entire retest of all the systems. It was about 1,000+ units in Hayward, California. So.
Wow, I hope they give you a raise for flying out on Christmas. Jeez.
I'm Jewish, so
okay.
that's why they called me. So.
Fair enough.
Sweet. Thank you, Keri. Round of applause again for her.